Hi, I'm Scott Harlan, owner and head engineer of Golden Sound Studio in Kensington, Maryland. We are a production facility that does a wide range of work, including singer-songwriter production, recording of albums and demos for bands, commercial production work, and even film score and musical arranging. We've got 3 different tracking spaces. One of them is essentially our main room, or a big room where we can record piano, record drums. If there are several musicians that need to perform together at the same time, that's the space we would set them up in. There's also a large isolation booth which can be used for separating 1 or 2 sounds away from whatever's happening in the big room. That typically would be used for guitar amplifiers or perhaps like fiddle or some sort of secondary instrument in a band. And then there's also a vocal booth that we use for all of our singers and also for voiceover artists doing commercial work. I record on Cubase, so we are a computer-based recording system, but before anything ever hits the computer, everything in front of that is analog. I've got actually an old vintage Sound Workshop recording console, and it's based on pretty much the same designs as how API consoles were built, which are very, very high-end recording consoles. So in going through that vintage analog gear before it gets recorded digitally, you still get that nice, fat, warm analog sound that people typically associate with the 2-inch tape type of recording. Mostly we do just recording, mixing, and mastering work, but on top of that I do also compose music for people. If I get people that are singers that write melodies but need backing tracks, I can compose music for that. For our commercial clientele, I've actually done jingle work and script work, and I've also been getting my hands wet a little bit with doing some film score work recently as well. So in addition to just recording and mixing your music, we can also do production work and string arrangements, horn arrangements, things that will complement the music. Especially since we have a real piano in our big room, it's always a nice feature for a studio to be able to give people an opportunity to play on a real piano. So that I do a lot of jazz work, a lot of kind of folk music work, but also just your traditional American folk, singer-songwriter type of music. I've done the typical rock band demos and albums. The thing I'm kind of known for is your acoustic singer-songwriter. I typically produce those types of artists, where somebody who sings, plays acoustic guitar, has some great songs written, but doesn't perform out with a band. They want to record a CD that sounds full band. So typically, I can get together with somebody like that and take it from just kind of how they would typically play it by themselves live, and supplement that with bass parts, keyboard parts, drum parts, percussion, whatever other things we feel can really push that music to the next level. First thing, I always like to sit down and just have kind of a pre-production meeting where we discuss, what we want to do, what direction we want to go in, figure out what our best starting point is. If it's somebody that has recorded before, then we can kind of build on that experience. If there are things they liked about it or things they didn't like about it, then we make sure we can accommodate those sorts of experiences. But ultimately, the typical thing that happens is we'll go through, do a scratch recording of the song, just have them record it the way that they would normally do it, just so I can kind of hear it and start to see what I hear in terms of how we could grow it into something bigger. Once we've kind of discussed that and have some agreement on where we should go with it, we'll typically bring in a session drummer or percussionist. I work professionally as a bass player, so I'll typically do bass tracks. And we kind of start by building a rhythm section for the song that fits and sits well with everything that the song already had in it, but just supplements it. Once we have bass and drum tracks down, and maybe even some keyboard tracks or anything like that, we'll go back in and do a real recording of their guitar parts and their vocal parts, or their piano parts and their vocal parts, whatever it might be. And then when we can hear their original song with just a rhythm track set underneath, then we can kind of hear what little colors we might want to add on top. If a string arrangement would be something nice, or an organ part might be nice, or whatever other things kind of can help elevate that song. And then we bring those instruments in, and when we get it to where everything just feels like it's hit its sweet spot, and that the song sounds the best it's going to sound, then we go into our mixing and mastering from there. It's not at all uncommon if we're trying to take something that's very, very raw and produce it to full album quality, like radio quality. It's not unrealistic to allow 10 to 15 hours of tracking time and an additional probably 5 to 10 hours of mixing time. So altogether, the studio time for a song fully produced, radio quality, you're probably looking at around 30 hours, maybe a little over, a little under. It doesn't have to be that great. It also depends if you weren't doing just one song, then the amount of time that's used for setup in a session goes a lot further. So a typical album, for example, 10 to 12 songs is usually around maybe 120 hours total project time, and that's because you're getting a lot more done for all the time that's spent setting up a certain way. So breaking it down for one song actually takes a lot longer than doing a full album or even a 5 or 6 song demo would. Well, the piano is definitely something that a lot of people are thrilled to see in here. Not just the fact that it's a real piano, but it's one with a very rich tone and very comfortable to play. Records very well too. So the piano's been definitely a high point. The aesthetic of the studio, a lot of people compliment that it feels very homey and comfortable, and there's definitely an Asian theme here, so it also is somewhat Zen-like and peaceful. We pride ourselves on keeping the studio very clean as well, so that makes people always feel a little more comfortable. In terms of the work environment, my work ethic, I tend to try to keep everything fun. What's the point of being in the music business if you don't enjoy it? So I typically try to keep sessions fairly light and have a sense of humor about things. And obviously we want to get work done. We're serious when it's time to be serious, but I don't like for people to put themselves in pressured situations and feel nervous in here or worry about the clock ticking and that kind of thing. I like for people to come in, play music that they love and enjoy playing it, and when you can do that, that's when you're going to get your best recordings. And anytime you're going to record somewhere, you should definitely go in, take a tour, see the facility, meet the person you're going to be working with, make sure that both the environment and the relationship that you're going to have with that person are comfortable for you. If you ever take a tour in a studio and just something strikes you funny, you're never going to record well there. That whatever it is that made you feel funny is always going to be there. So definitely visit a few studios. Find one where you click with the engineer and where the space is a comfortable place for you to work. And also make sure you get to listen to some of the quality of the work that's being done there. Not all people are aware that just because it's a studio doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sound great. Depending on the person's level of experience, the quality of the equipment, the quality of the facility, even a quote-unquote studio doesn't always sound as good as you would expect a studio to. So yeah, to definitely check your studios out before you book time. In terms of having found a studio where you're going to be comfortable working and you're wondering what things you can do to be ready for that, know your material. Practice, practice, practice. No matter how much you've played it live, practice to get ready for your session. If you're planning on doing work using a metronome or a click track where you're going to be kind of layering things and it all has to stay in a locked tempo, practice to a metronome at home. If you're a person that's never done that, you're not going to be able to just learn how to do it in a day. So anything that's going to be new in the studio is something you need to get yourself comfortable with before you go in. There are two aspects to looking at what would make a professional recording studio a different, probably better, but different environment than working in a home studio. On the technical level, very few home studios are built out to have sonically correct rooms. Also on the technical level, very few home studios are going to have the level of equipment that most professional studios do. There is something to be said for tracking through preamps that cost $1,500 to $2,000 per channel, as opposed to something that you buy at the local music store that you pay $100 a channel for. A $1,000 mixer might be great to a guy that's upgrading from a 4-track, but it still isn't a $100,000 mixer. And for most practical purposes in the music business, you do get what you pay for. There's a lot to be said for that in a professional studio that you're not usually going to find in a home studio. The second aspect of it that can be worth comparing is your personal working environment. In a recording studio, all you basically have to be able to do is perform, and that's it. You're not responsible for anything else. So in a certain way, that's a lot less pressure on you and makes your one job a whole lot easier. In a home studio environment, if you're recording yourself, you end up having to wear a lot more hats. You become the engineer, you become the producer, and you're the performer. And in trying to juggle those things, one can definitely kill the other. If you're having a technical problem on the engineering side, if you spend half an hour trying to get that fixed, all your energy's drained, and now you're supposed to sit down and play this great performance, but you've got nothing left. Those types of problems don't occur when it's somebody else's responsibility to get the engineering side right.